So I suppose most people in the audience are aware that Laurence Fox has now been suspended by GB News. And I say suspended. Today, the results of the investigation are going to happen. And as he has already said in a video that I'm going to bring up later, this is meaning that he's going to be sacked. Let's be honest, as we both know, anytime they say, we're going to have a debate, we're going to have a investigation, what it means is the conclusion is already foregone and just the process is the punishment. The same thing is happening to Dan Wootton. He has been suspended. He's been sacked from the Daily Mail. And now Calvin Robinson, friend of the show, who was just in yesterday recording a fantastic bit of content, has also been suspended for supporting his colleagues. There are absolutely going to be other people on this list. And I'm going to run through exactly the reasons why this is happening and then open it up to the floor for all of us to discuss how GB News seems to be committing suicide to seek the approval of people that since day one have had it out for them and their advertisers and sooner see them dead in the street than accept an apology. And it's just very, very frustrating. And I've ended up in the middle of this myself and it's just very annoying. This is, without further ado, something that you can subscribe to our website for as little as £5 a month or £2.50 at the moment, I believe, if you use code SARGON, because we're doing a half-price membership deal. We won't be censoring our hosts or holding back. And this is something that some people, unfortunately, who are currently governing GB News, I'm sure that they're trying to do their best, but they could probably learn to do better, should learn about, and that is the friend-enemy distinction. You have people who are always going to be against your way of life. It is not about principles. It is not about rudeness. It is not about decorum. It is about whether or not they would sooner see your vision of the future extinguished and theirs put in its place. You can't negotiate with these people. And both Josh and Harry, for Josh's series Contemplations, had a really constructive dialogue about this. So I recommend people go and give it a watch. Right, let's give a brief overview as what's happened. So it all started here, as from David Atherton's been gracious enough to tweet out the clip. This was BBT Politics Live, which they do pretty much every day about midday. And they had Jeff Norcott on, who's actually going to be coming in soon and talking to Josh about his book. Very gracious for him to come on the network. Jeff is a very centrist, tepid comedian who just decided to say, hey, look, men are having problems. Male suicide is an issue. I think we should have a minister for men. I've spoken to Nick Fletcher about this, who wants to do this. He's, again, a very tepid centrist type who trains people, young boys, to be electrical engineers. So he's actually got practical hands-on experience in providing boys a vocation. So that's positive. Jeff just went, this is a reasonable request. And Ava Santina, someone that I've had interactions with in the past, and we'll see that soon, decided to dismiss this out of hand. And my other conversation in, well, actually, women are most effective. So if we can just play the clip, full context.
Conservative MP, new role would champion issues such as reducing male suicide. Would that be something you'd be in favour of?
Well, what's interesting about that is the hostility it sometimes faces whenever it comes up. I saw a programme where there was like a feminist academic and a Lib Dem MP, and they were so hostile to this idea. And I thought, if you flipped those things, i.e. that it's the biggest cause of death for men under 50 is suicide, men are less likely to go to the doctors, men are less likely to maintain friendships. If that was for women, we'd often look at, well, why is society making that happen? Whereas with men, the argument is often, why are they doing that to themselves? Totally wedded to the idea, but the hostility towards the idea, I find it instructive.
Ava?
I think that it feeds into the culture a little bit, this Minister for Men argument. In my mind, I think there should be a Minister for Mental Health, which would be all-encompassing. I mean, you've got something like 7 million children waiting for prescriptions for mental health at the moment. It's a crisis that's endemic throughout the country, not specific to men. And I think, a lot of ministers kind of bandy this about to sort of, I'm sorry, but make an enemy out of women. I think, not you, and I don't think your book is. I don't
accept that. I don't think it is to make an enemy. If we looked at during COVID, men were literally more likely to die from COVID. And I don't really want to cast myself as a meninist or one of these guys from the manosphere, because that's not who I am. But I do find it interesting that sometimes the arguments tend to throw it back.
But who was doing all the work during COVID? A lot of the time, if you looked into people's households, it was the women who were taking on the laundry, the school care, doing their jobs.
Any of that, what I'm saying, that there are specific issues that men face that might warrant specific attention. I mean, literally, the biggest killer of men under 50 is suicide. That is an arresting statistic. And if that doesn't warrant specific attention, mental health is an umbrella issue.
I have to say that is also because women are unsuccessful. Feeds into that statistic.
But it feels like, it just doesn't feel like you've got any space for this idea that men might have unique challenges that face them. And the problem is, even as I'm saying this, in my mind, it's like I've got out the violin and I don't want to be...
read the book.
I don't want to be this guy, because that's part of the problem, is because you're encouraged at one level is men need to talk about their problems more, and then the moment you do it, you're like, all right, but not quite so often and not quite so loud. So like you say, the book is more light-hearted than that, but it certainly goes around the...
So I want to say, The original pretext for Lawrence's segment, which is coming up in a second, was that Ava was smirking at male suicide. I don't think that's a fair characterization. She was just having a pleasant conversation with Jeff, but she was not being an honest actor. And she is not an honest actor, and she has contempt for men, and I think I'm justified in saying that with the later clip. But it is clear by obfuscating the issue, by saying we don't need a minister for men, we just need a minister for mental health. It is because she is opposed to the idea that men would also have a minister on par with the Women and Equalities Minister. I think that's a fair assessment.
I was personally amazed that he introduced the topic of male suicide by saying people don't take it seriously, people bring up other things, and then immediately she went on to say, well, women did the housework in the pandemic.
Yeah,
and has nothing to do.
Within about 30 seconds to a minute.
And also,
she's proven him completely right. Also, there's just the tendency with women like Ava is that Jeff says, independently as its own point, men have problems. Why don't we do something to tackle those problems? She turns around and the only thing that she can conceptualize is, well, women have problems.
Yes.
This is not the discussion that is being had right here.
And it's also her only rejoinder is, well, the only reason the suicide statistic is more pronounced among men is because they're more successful. That means nothing. That just means more men are dying, and this means that we need to address the issue. That doesn't take away the issue. It's just that you have a problem with men. And I think I'm well within my rights to say that, as we'll say later.
I think it's kind of sickening that this issue is, as he says, the number one killer for men under 50. And it's just a stepping stone for people to shoehorn in their own agendas rather than an issue in and of itself. If the shoe was on the other foot, and someone said, yeah, suicide is the number one killer for women, I'd be like, that's terrible. What can we do about that?
Exactly, yeah.
And it's not it's not a gender war thing to say that, yeah, there are people who are being neglected by the attention of society.
But you would say that only if you actually cared about solving the problem rather than stoking said gender war, because she said that she stokes a cultural war and kicks up hate against women. It's like, no, you want to be in the privileged position to hate men without repercussions.
Well, it's a consistent problem that's been going back years and years. Whenever anybody brings up any kind of systemic issues on men's side where, like you say, we have the higher rates of suicide. When people have tried to bring that up, we had the issue, I forget who brought it up. There was the infamous incident where Jess Phillips.
Philip Davies, you're referring to.
Yeah, Philip Davies brought it up and Jess Phillips just laughed the idea offhand. So women like Ava, they want to insist that men are stoking culture war issues, that people outside of her frame of reference are starting all of this without realizing that she is feeding into the very problem which she considers to be stoking these flames in the first place.
Yes, and so there was a brief update after the show. Jeff made the point of saying, I thought I was being reasonable, and then everyone dogpiles on you. Ava responded, and she said, I was a little rash on my anti-Minister for Men comments, which I regret, and I'm very interested in a brief for young men's mental health. So again, containing it only in the mental health sphere, but not on men's issues, because she realizes that currently with a unilateral minister for women, but not for men, women maintain a position of privilege with the feminist narrative, which she buys into.
Well, I just want to say as well, I'd be interested to see what the actual solutions put forward by a minister for men would look like, because men and women deal with problems so differently. It wouldn't just be a case where men don't take well, as he was struggling there, men don't take well to the idea of being coddled.
Yes.
And so it would have to be something very first foot forward, very proactive, very active for men to do to be able to solve the problems.
This is Nick Fletcher's idea, is creating vocations for men like he has with electrical engineering, but I would assume that Ava would probably agree with Caitlin Moran's statement, aka boys are killing themselves and they need feminism and emotional expression to be more like women, which is not the solution. But I'm just going to move forward because we've got a lot to get through. So this was the crux of it. Ava decided to tweet out a clip where Laurence Fox, who has had men that he's friends with, multiple of them, killed themselves via suicide. He took offense to this. He went on GB News, was asked what he thought about it, and he said some fairly crass comments. Laurence himself has admitted this since. I came out and characterized it as that, and I've spoken to Laurence, and it says that's a completely fair assessment of this. So we're just going to listen to what he said that caused this total storm.
We're past the watershed, so I can say this. Show me a single self-respecting man that would like to climb into bed with that woman, ever, who wasn't an incel, who wasn't a cucked little incel. That little woman has been fed, spoon-fed oppression day after day after day after day, starting with the lie of the gender wage gap. And she sat there, and I'm going like, if I met you in a bar and that was like sentence 3, chances of me just walking away are just huge. We need powerful, strong, amazing women who make great points for themselves. We don't need these sort of feminist 4.0. They're pathetic and embarrassing. Who'd want to shag that?
Oh, Laurence. Well, look,
Even if you agree with what Laurence has said there, he did not put it across in a way which is going to convince people. He didn't need the insults. He was perfectly right in saying that we need strong and interesting women to give their perspectives, but we don't need Ava as some sort of token person to fill an Ofcom compliance role to say basically nothing. That is a totally fair assessment, but the whole shagging comment didn't do him any favors.
It was crass and unnecessary and was only ever going to gin up some kind of controversy. I don't know why exactly Laurence said it, but it seemed to just be something completely off the cuff that he thought would be funny. And there is a time and a place for such things. And especially when GB News has been as critically hounded as it has by opposition news broadcasters ever since it started, you know you've got to be a bit smarter about these things.
So I think that the main issue with this is that he's giving ammunition to people who want to see himself and GB News destroyed. And it wasn't a good tactical thing. But I think that people should be able to say whatever they want as long as it's not libelous,
I agree.
within the limits of the law. So I don't think that anyone should, be suspended or
And there's
even come into the firing line for things that they've said, unless, of course, it's either a criminal thing in the sense of, it's not being called a hate crime or what have you. It's actually them either defaming someone, libeling someone, something like
or
that.
calling for violence, which he has not done. And despite this, GB News decided to say, comments made tonight, this was on Tuesday, on GB News by Laurence Fox were totally unacceptable. What he said does not reflect our values, and we apologise unreservedly for the comments and the offence that they have caused. We've launched an investigation and will be apologising to the individual involved. They do not want your apology. They want blood. They have had it out for you since day one. These were the advertiser boycotts. This is why they call you GBBs. They do not want your apology. They want you dead. This was a mistake. And this is going to cost me bookings, 100%. I know that there are still people on the network who have condemned Laurence from the off, who are happy with the fact that he is gone because they think that it will salvage the station and their reputation. And you know what? I just think that's cowardice.
Well, you have a lot more experience of the inner workings of these things than either of us do.
And I like going there. I'm just going to declare it.
Yep, you've been the one that's booked. But there has, not specifically from you or anyone, but there has been mentioned that the sorts of people that can end up behind the scenes in these broadcasters are not the sorts of people that are on our side, so to speak. They're not the sorts of people who want to be able to promote, if you want to go on about the culture war, our side or our perspective on that thing. They are careerist broadcasters who've come straight out of university, have absorbed all of the propaganda that you get if you go through a liberal university course on media or presenting or anything like that. And so they will try and put those presuppositions into the broadcasting whenever they can.
Yeah, and this is just the consequence, and you'll know this because you did a media degree, of hiring people fresh out of uni because they're cheap. You've got to gatekeep better. But this was at the executive level as well. The executives, I think, were just worried about drawing too much fire from Ofcom after Dame Caroline Dinenage, about a week or so ago, sent a letter to GB News insinuating she was going to get Ofcom involved off the back of the passing of the online safety bill, which isn't in law yet, but is looming over everyone's heads, including ours, to persecute Bev Turner for saying that Russell Brand should have his day in court before he is persecuted and has his entire livelihood cancelled. That is unacceptable. GB News decided to get behind Bev Turner, and the government backed off because they realised it was such overreach. Now, this is just the next excuse. This is the pretext for what they've always wanted to do, which is destroy you. Now, they might say this isn't in line with our values. Fair enough, if you think what Laurence said is offensive. Turns out it's in line with Ava's, because she's been using the I wouldn't shag you pejorative for ages on Twitter, just at random people. So it's okay for her to do it. Got it. Okay. All right. That's fine. I guess that's just how it works now. So Laurence came out and just doubled down and just said, Don't shag hot, boring, mindless, blonde 26th wave feminists. That way, misery lives. Every human life is sacred. All lives matter. Again, I would probably agree with his missus and just saying, just walk away at that point. But that is Laurence's brand. And they hired him knowing that he was a verbal loose cannon. He is a firebrand, and that's why he has an audience. So GB News trying to hem Laurence Fox in for inflammatory rhetoric is probably not going to work. He also doubled down again. I'm not going to read all of that because it's extensive. And then they have announced that they have suspended him. We'll be apologising to Miss Evans today. So Lewis Brackpool was on earlier in the week, and I did ask him, how did you feel being the last ever guest on the Laurence Fox show? Because we knew how this investigation was going to come. He's not going to have his show anymore. Laurence has since come out and announced he has an apology. He has apologized for the way in which he said it, but he does not retract anything that he said because he knows that Ava has utter contempt for men and that he knows that the apology will land on deaf ears anyway, and he does not appreciate GB News sacking him and persecuting other presenters for coming to his defense. And all that's happened here is that GB News has lost a sizable amount of its audience who are going to follow Laurence off the platform, which is frustrating because I don't want there to be a civil war at GB News when up until this point, they've been basically the only network brave enough to platform dissidents, particularly like Neil Oliver and our friend Calvin Robinson. And me, I get books on very few other stations unless it's to be cannibalized. And unlike quite a lot of people that go on these stations, I don't just take whatever bookings to say whatever I like because I'm not going to swear, careerist grifter. I know there's lots of people that do that, actually. What I hope is the ability to go on and spread the kind of ideas that we talk about on Lotus Eaters to try and reconstitute the culture to a wider audience. And it seems that window of opportunity is rapidly narrowing because they're placating to people that want to see them destroyed. It's very frustrating. So then Dan Wootton decided to come out and apologize. Silly move from Dan. Now, for context, Dan's been under a lot of pressure recently because the Byline Times have ran what I would describe as, until you can prove the allegations in a court of law, a possibly defamatory piece accusing him of sexual impropriety. So he has not addressed these claims on air, other than to say, I reject them. Laurence Fox has said in his prior video for Reclaim the Media that he has been counselling Dan as a friend and offered him free legal services via the Bad Law Project the entire time. And Dan has come out and said that Laurence was in the wrong, and he's tried to say that I was just smiling out of shock. Dan, this wasn't the way to go about it. I understand you were trying to salvage your position, but again, they were always going to come for you. He apologised twice. And since, Ava's friends, now Ava actually liked this, have come out and said, oh, it doesn't matter if you've apologised. You personify the worst of men. You're trying to cater to a crowd that will never accept it. And so Dan gets suspended as well. Dan gets suspended for just not challenging Laurence on an offensive comment. It's offensive to the person, not to everyone, not to the women coming out and defending Laurence. He's been cancelled for doing that once in his thousands of hours of airtime, despite doing lots of other excellent journalistic work. No matter how you feel about Dan, whether you watch his show or not, this is egregious and wrong, but it's also why you don't apologise. And then, totally unrelated, Mail Online terminates Dan's column. Wasn't on their platform. This is just total persecution of the hosts for being dissenters. This is unreasonable. So then, rival station, speaking of Talk TV, Piers Morgan comes out and defends Ava. Ava is a very talented journalist and a delightful person. Fox is a disgusting, misogynist piece of trash. Piers, you're a bloody liar. You know she's not a delightful person. You know that you only have her on to hit your Ofcom quota. You employ her with viewer fees every time to come on and give a brain-dead leftist take, and it means that all of your outrage anytime she says something is incredibly performative and you're a disingenuous hack. Do you know why I know that? Because I sat next to her when she practically accused me and my friends of being rapists in waiting for saying, oh, maybe you shouldn't be allowed to use false rape allegations to scare men. Disgusting. You've made loads of money off of that clip on YouTube, monetizing it with a sensationalist headline, which she then says, I'm defaming her for using the same framing that you've used. It's been up for over a year. So, funnily enough, the people that are getting cancelled on GB News right now, they're the sincere ones. Everyone dogpiling for their own ratings and their own respectability are just hacks, and I think it's disgusting. For anyone that doesn't know the context of this, that anyone that hasn't seen this, I'll just play a brief version of it that someone's cut together, just so I'm not, as Ava is accused, misrepresenting what she said.
But Ava, your point about, if men were that alpha, then they wouldn't be that bothered by this, doesn't really help us when it comes to boys growing up. And that is one of my worries, that for teenage boys now, they are so terrified of the consequences of putting a foot out of line. It's hard enough being a young teenager, working out how things are, working out how to do dating and all of that, without the terror that if you touch in the wrong place at the wrong time, you may find that your whole life is destroyed.
See, I
and there
like
is
that
far
terror.
too much Well,
I like that.
As a
I
mother
think
of
that
a
men
teenage
should be
boy, I
frightened.
don't like
Really?
that
That's the
terror.
most
I do.
malicious thing I've ever heard.
That is
I think that
awful.
men should be frightened
I think
to
you'd
touch
feel
women in a way
differently
that
if you
they're
were,
not comfortable with.
But we're talking about
Yeah, but we're not
teenage
talking
years,
about. We're
children.
not talking about.
We're
Yeah,
talking
but
about
it's an
young
interesting
children.
thing, mate.
Boys are all terrified. I know that from talking to my son. He's just like, I'm just not going there. Is that healthy?
Yes, I think it is actually. I think it's better to not have a physical relationship than to have one that could ruin a woman's life.
But then, how do they ever start?
Well, don't. If you're not 100%
Don't.
sure,
What? Are we going
don't.
for-
What are you going to have? A bunch of neutered
Celebrate.
boys who
But
never
it's
had.
so obvious.
We actually
It's
do
sort
have
of
that.
like-
Gen Z is having far less sexual relationships
Yes,
than any
they
ever
are.
before.
It's true.
And
young
hang
people
on.
have stopped having sex.
I agree with the first part of your sentence, actually. If you're not willing to have a sexual relationship with clearly defined lines, don't have one. And so I actually told my mates at university, don't sleep around with girls. 1, girls don't bring a guy home that you don't know what he's capable of. 2, guys, don't bring a girl home if you think that possibly she could have a false accusation against you.
Can I make another point here? Which
I
think-
find. I mean, look, that sentence to me, when I was your age, right? How old are you?
23.
23. When I was your age, the idea you would even have that sort of thought process.
Yeah, I
would
wouldn't
be
have those sort of
unthinkable.
mates that would ever cross the line, so I wouldn't have to have that
I never
conversation
said my
with
mates.
any of my friends.
Don't throw my mates in with a bunch of violent people.
And is there a certain? Is there?
Now, she full well knows what she did there, especially with the giggling and the smirking, and she suffered no career repercussions for that. There wasn't a single Ofcom complaint, as far as I know, that went anywhere with it. And the same network keeps booking her over and over just to capitalise on clickbait whenever she says something outrageous. But Laurence Fox gets repercussions for basically saying he doesn't find her attractive. Yeah, again, rude. I wouldn't have said it. Not very convincing. But that is egregious, and that creates a climate that petrifies men with false criminal accusations. She can have a career. Doesn't seem right to me, but there you go.
Well, I mean, if you don't mind me commenting, that smirk that she put on while you interrupted and made your point there, to me was, like you say, completely egregious, vile and disgusting, because it indicates either one of two things. One, that she was amused that you would even feel the need and have the ability to stand up for yourself in the first place, a kind of minor indication of why do you even care, bro? Or the fact that what you were saying was that young men, Gen Z, aren't having sex anywhere near as much as the previous generations did in the first place. Possibly, and this is my interpretation of it, a smug smile at the idea that you, like she said, we often get insults from people like Ava, who always call people incels. The smug smirk at the laugh at the idea of her, what a little baby virgin incel kind of person. Because whether or not she says those things, there is still a lot of social capital put into the idea that a man has the ability to attract women. And being able to sleep with women is a great indicator that you're an attractive man to other women. And so therefore, she's laughing at the idea either that you're standing up for yourself in the first place, which of course you're going to, or she's kind of being hypocritical and laughing at the idea of, I don't want men to have any kind of comfort in trying to approach women, but I will still judge those men at the same time for not having been able to succeed with women in the past anyway.
Yeah, and
it's a catch-22 for any young man, and this is the situation that you're talking about, why it's so toxic for young men on the dating scene.
Yeah, and
Spot on.
I don't know her personal circumstances, but what I do know is that whatever personal hang-ups she has around men, dating, gender, and that is a cultural contaminant that will seep out and continue to petrify men and stop and make women unhappy as well. Because lots of women have said, I'm not getting the relationships I want, I'm not being approached, and I'm very lonely as well. So she is doing women a disservice too. So any time that she purports to be on women's side as well, it's just a lie. And I'm going to say, I don't understand how this person is allowed a career beyond the fact that it is Ofcom mandated for her to be on panels to provide balance, basically stymie any kind of constructive debate when she says things like that, whereas Laurence Fox is just a bit rude. But I do know that, again, you shouldn't apologise because they will always have it out for you. Because here's Dawn Butler, sitting MP, who says, Ava, I'm sorry you've been put through this. GB News should be shut down. It's pure trash. Again, sitting MP, member of the opposition, who supports the online safety bill, decided to say that entire TV networks should be shut down for one host's crass comment. It is a war on dissent. I also suggested that maybe if Dawn Butler wanted to be effective, she could write a strongly worded letter like the one that she forged from being President Obama in her support. So clearly a very intelligent and honest person there. Then,
sorry, all of this coming immediately after the online harms bill, the safety bill, has finally passed as well, is very
suspicious.
It's indicative that what happened is that they know that as soon as that comes into actual effective power in the law and the courts, that this is what everybody who's a dissenter is going to get. This is the treatment that they're all going to get. This is all guns blazing as a warning, a knowledge of what's coming to you.
Yeah, this will be us in a year. I'm telling you now, this will be us in a year's time. And that's why genuinely we're thankful that every single person that stuck by us and supported us will be sticking by the people that have been persecuted in this. Again, I've spoken to Calvin today. It's egregious what's going on right now. And we are up against such titanic forces because other mainstream media outlets, not just the politicians, have a vested interest in making this the prime story when, as you said before the segment started, there are other stories going on, like the invasion of the Italian island, like that 15-year-old girl that's been stabbed, things that are actually affecting people. But instead, this is a way to conduct a coordinated smear on their opposition. Ava went on Good Morning Britain the other morning. They were questioning, not the Laurence Fox affair specifically, but should Conservative MPs, sitting members of the government, have shows on this channel? So they haven't done anything wrong. Again, I don't think sitting MPs should have TV shows. Actually, I'm just going to say, because I think that's a conflict of interest. It's basically a party political broadcast on in the but that doesn't just serve for GB. They aren't asking that of David Lammy and LBC, are they? No, instead they're deliberately targeting other shows on GB News because they want to bring the network down.
I mean, when we talk about the fact that there's so many other different news stories going on at the same time, it's not just the fact that it's the destruction of GB News. It's the fact that specifically it's the destruction of GB News centered around this one woman and her grievances. Yes, what was said was very crass. It was very rude. I don't stand by what Laurence Fox said. If I'm perfectly honest, on a personal level, I'm not a big fan of Laurence Fox in the first place, and that's my personal feelings. I'm not going to go out and try and get his entire career destroyed, however, just because of my own personal feelings on the matter. But it's a great way to keep the news centered around her from her own personal perspective. It's fantastic advertisement for her and her career and the organizations around her.
Well, it's because they're getting trounced in the ratings by every GB News show in the time slots. They just want to create it so that it's hegemonic again, so that no one has an option but to watch these terrible channels whose programming's been nothing but progressive sludge for the last couple of decades.
It's very pragmatic for the BBC and Good Morning Britain
to have BBC.
To have such an easy way to try and destroy one of their primary competitors.
Yeah, well, BBC, they brought on 3 guests who all said GB News should be shut down. Where's the Ofcom balance on that? Again, it only cuts one way. And this BBC is very instructive as well. When Gary Lineker was being looked into for political bias, what happened? All of his colleagues walked out in solidarity. They stood behind him and they backed down. That's what should have happened. If you don't cave, they would have gone to bed and just tried a new attack in the morning because they will always attack you. It's not specifically about this. But Adam Bolton used to be on Sky News and he actually shouted at Bev. I've forgotten her name.
Bev Turner?
No, not Bev Turner. The one that broke lockdown rules.
I think I've seen the clip of it going around since he's been appearing talking about GB News.
Yeah, he's shouted and swore at her to sit down and get in place right before it went on air and immediately snapped into professional mode. And she was just shocked. So, he's allowed to shout at women in certain ways and still be invited on these shows. Same with Caroline Noakes. She was on this as well. So Caroline Noakes, one of the chairs of the Women's and Equality Committee, has been during the Conservative government, also the head of 50-50 Parliament. So she wants gender-based equity. Yeah, she's not. I once said that she wasn't very bright. I didn't even tag her in the tweet. And she sought out my Twitter account to reply to me. She's that insecure. She's not an intelligent person. She said, I've never been on that network. It should be shut down. Turns out that GB News compiled all the times that she's actually been on, which is 9 times. And she was last on 2 weeks ago to talk about Russell Brand. But okay, either you're not bright or you're lying. But again, all the government, all the media moving in one concerted direction. This is just a character attack.
Yeah, it is a character attack. And the fact that it's coming from all of these people who, from my personal opinion, from the information that we know and that what we've provided and what we've seen, is that every single one of these people, Piers Morgan, Adam Bolton, every single one of these people, none of them have any principles whatsoever. None of them have any standards that they would apply, that every single one of them will stab you in the back and throw you under the bus as soon as it benefits their career pragmatically. So the fact that any of these people think for a second that they have a leg to stand on in judging somebody else's character, whether I agree with what Laurence Fox said or not, every single one of these people has said as bad as Laurence Fox, if not 10 times worse, when they think they can get away with it, when they know they can get away with it, because it's their buddies who are the ones regulating the broadcasting networks.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
They're also not even trying to hide the veneer of being unbiased as well, in that they're inviting people on who have a direct incentive to destroy GB News because it profits their own careers in competing networks, or they cover their politics negatively.
Yeah, you're just legitimating the idea that GB News spreads the conspiracy theory that every single other mainstream media network wants them extinguished and acts in concert to achieve it. So Konstantin Kissinger's made a really good point. GB News presenter made some offensive comments, so the station should be shut down. Several BBC presenters nonced kids for decades, so the station must be allowed to operate. Make it make sense. Alison Pearson capitalises on this as well, just giving the examples of Channel 4, Christian Guru Murthy, the guy that hosts Channel 4 News. He called Steve Baker a see you next Tuesday off air. Fair enough. But he's now decided to go on Strictly Come Dancing. Again, he's been totally embraced. He's kept his career. He's now prattling around on a Saturday night on the BBC. And then Gordon Brown, it's quite funny. He went on Sky News. He was asked what he thought of this. Now, I was in the Sky News green room, and sod it, they leaked personal information about me, so I don't really care. In the Sky News green room, I overheard some of the journalists talking about just how much it felt like Gordon Brown was back to his usual rhetoric, back when he was campaigning, back when he was good again. So again, they don't just hide their bias.
Gordon Brown was good?
Not seeing things, apparently. But he just frankly said, Ofcom needs to be given more powers to investigate whether or not these stations should be on the air at all.
There you go. Shut down my enemies.
Yep, party political broadcast.
Give promotions and extra money to my friends.
Yeah, and as Alison Pearson pointed out in her Telegraph article, isn't it funny when he, speaking of disparaging women, described that Labour voter as just a bigoted woman and had to come out and apologise for it. So we're really taking him as a moral arbiter. But again, it's not about hypocrisy. It's about hierarchy. But speaking of Sky News, for anyone who wants to watch and have their ears burned out for 13 minutes, I went on there on Wednesday night. I was invited on under the auspices of, we're just going to have a little chat and ask what you think. And I was not told who I was going to be on against until I was sat in the chair. I was invited into the studio and then shuffled into a down the line room, which was very unprofessional. I also requested that Lotus seats be in the tagline. They confirmed that was going to happen. And they didn't do that, but they put my opponent, who was on Novara Media, in the tagline, who they then gave more airtime and allowed to scream at me. And the host decided to rig the questions against me and say at the end of the interview, well, we'll put her out of her misery, as if talking to me was such a burden. So I'm not going to play any clips from that. You can go watch that in your own time if you want to torture yourself. The important thing about this
is... to back you up on this, the one or two clips that I have seen from this, I think you handled yourself very well when the questions, as you say, were completely rigged against you. Every single question was just a series of buzzwords with a question mark at the end of it, and you did a very good job in calling that out.
I think I could have done a fair bit better, but it's also, you're walking into the lion's den, you're going to get bit.
The whole thing was an attempt at a big gotcha.
Yeah, frankly so. But the reason I raise this is not to put myself at the centre of the storm. It's because now they're trying to do so, because the Telegraph decided to do an article without ever contacting me for comment, only talking to Maya, whatever her bloody name is. She's an awful person, so I don't care.
That is actually going against all of the standards of basic journalism that I was taught going through university, even when it was going against documentaries for somebody as controversial and notorious as Purple Aki. We were always told, okay, it doesn't matter who you're talking about. If you want to have a veneer of journalistic fairness, you get comments from everybody involved so that they can put their side of the story in front.
I didn't expect him to come up.
I know, I wasn't expecting either, but it just popped into my head.
Good example, though.
Yeah, but literally, so Purple Aki gets better treatment than I do.
Yes.
That's mad.
Literally.
And this entire article, again, written by a staff writer who I haven't read anything else she's written, so I don't know the veracity of her journalistic integrity. But in this article, it was dreadful, because the entire article was about me and the interlocutor. The claim was that she wasn't getting paid, and when she was offered pay, it was a fraction of what I was offered. So just to set the record straight,
your fault, even if that is true?
It's not true at all.
No.
Just to set the record straight here, what happens is when you're booked for media, if you're sensible and you do your own accounting, which I have to, you go, is there an appearance fee associated with this? So you can get your invoice in order, you can get on the books, you have to process everything properly so you don't commit tax fraud. So I asked that, and they just said, yeah, £200. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll come into the studio. So when I showed up during the interview, she was saying, I'm so tired. I was asked on to talk about misogyny, and I'm so tired. And I just went, look, you're sitting here, you're paid to speak about this. And she went, I'm not getting paid for this. It's like, number one, yeah, you are. Your day job is at Novara Media, so you're literally paid to talk about this all the time. But if you weren't paid for this particular interview, well, I'll say this. Someone texted me saying, to not get paid for something or to not ask for an appearance fee is not misogyny, it's an idiot tax. If you don't ask to be paid for your time, that's on you. But she then turned around and said after the fact, clearly to Sky News, all right, what's he getting paid then? I want that. And she said they offered her £75. Now, from an email from a different producer, they came back to me and said, actually, sorry, my other colleague got it wrong. It wasn't 200, it's actually 75, which means retroactively, they offered me a lower fee than they'd promised over the phone to try and avoid it looking like they were being unfair to her because she's a woman. So that means they also leaked confidential information about my rate of pay to a guest who was opposite me on the panel who already animused me. That is staggering malpractice by Sky News, and that has just been made public. So now I'm fine with making it public, and I've included it in a complaint because turns out, obviously, she didn't contact me. She doesn't reply to this tweet. In a complaint to Ipso and to Ofcom. Again, Ofcom probably not going to do anything. Ipso said they're going to follow up on it. Excuse me if I don't have much faith on these bodies that are meant to be practicing journalistic proper practice and impartiality. Anyway, then what happened was Ava decided to watch the segment. Yeah, and said that GB News commentator went on Sky News this evening and said that I'd encouraged women to file false rape allegations. I have never ever said this. Yeah, and I didn't say that either, love. What I said is, quote, Ava said women should be able to weaponize false rape allegations in order to keep men afraid of actually committing sexual assault. Because yes, that was an accurate summary. You were apathetic about the ability of women, like Amber Heard, for example, to file false rape accusations as long as it made a climate of what you think is safety for women from actual predators. And I think it's reprehensible that any man should go to prison for a false rape allegation and that any woman should face no consequences for making false allegation. But I don't think that you care about that. Again, you're welcome to correct me. You haven't responded yet. You're welcome to correct me if I've made the wrong assertion that you don't care about men that go to prison over false rape allegations. You just want power and to punish men. That is my reading. You're welcome to respond, but you haven't yet. Very frustrating. Anyway, so I'll just quickly sum up that. Neil Oliver at least gets it. Neil Oliver, who has been behind everyone in this situation. That's definitely what I will say. I support Ava's right to speak freely. I support Lawrence's right to speak freely. I support the right of everyone to speak freely. The policing of every word and one witch hunt after the other will be the undoing of us all. And I'll finish on Paul Embry, who is usually one of GB News' panel leftists. Now, Paul is actually a very nice guy. I've been on the opposite to him. He's a firefighter, so he does a useful job. I just disagree with him on the means of getting a better country because he's a trade union Labour member. But he said, these people really don't care about the nature of the comments. Similarly, unpleasant comments have been made on other broadcast platforms. Think of BBC C4 panel shows, Jimmy Carr, Frankie Boyle, Joe Brand on Have I Got News For You, saying he throw acid at Nigel Farage.
There was a fantastic list I saw of this where Frankie Boyle, people were making jokes about how they were going to kill white people on Frankie Boyle's show, whatever it's called. There was one where Marion Margolis, that diabolical...
Margolis, yeah.
Margolis, that
Harry Potter, yeah.
Diabolical woman from Harry Potter and sadly one of my favourite shows, Blackadder, was saying things about how... I don't remember what the exact quote was, but it was certainly a lot worse than whatever Laurence Fox may have said.
Yeah, and so Paul just says, for them, it's all about getting GB News off air. That's their motivation. And so I just want to finish, and I'm sorry I've taken up so much of your time, but I just want to finish with the fact that I am very disappointed that GB News has decided to even launch investigations against some of their most beloved, loyal, and sincere hosts, including particularly Laurence Fox and my friend Calvin Robinson, because you are persecuting your friends on behalf of the glee of your enemies. And what they want, even if they didn't get kicked out, what they want is for us to be infighting and distracted while they reassert their hegemony. GB News has so far been a fantastic opportunity to platform genuine dissenters, including myself, and I count myself very lucky to have basically been there since the start and do gigs. But I can't say that many people will stick around, particularly in the audience, and also some people that go on, if you decide to treat people like Mark Stein, Laurence Fox, and Calvin Robinson in this way. Stop doing your enemy's bidding. We're all better than that. If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, why not visit our website, where you can get the podcast live, full, uncensored, and for free from 1 o'clock UK time every weekday. And while you're there, for as little as £5 a month, you can access all of our paywalled premium content, such as my colleague Stelios' philosophy series Symposium, where in this episode, it's a two-parter, he talks to Carl and Bo about Machiavelli's discourses on Livy. And if you'd like to follow Stelios and what he's putting out on Twitter, you can follow him at Panayotu90st on Twitter, and the rest of us over at LotusEaters_com. Until next time, goodbye.